But massive sequence of events, I guess, throughout the week where they played the Indiana Pacers and Russell Westbrook was benched for the last period of the game. I think he might have gone off around the 7-minute mark of the fourth quarter and never saw game time again. And basically, Frank Vogel was asked after the game why that was the case, and he said very simply that I was just putting my best lineup out there to win the game. And I think he's been given full control by the front office to bench Russ whenever he wants. And if he feels that Russell Westbrook isn't contributing to winning, then he can bench him towards the end of games. And I guess when you've got a guy that's on $44 million, that takes a little bit of time to process you actually doing that. And I think we can all sit back and say, well, why hasn't this happened earlier? But I don't think it's a surprise that it's taken till this point, because at the end of the day, Russell Westbrook is on $45 million. And the optics of having a guy sit on the bench and not be able to finish the game for you in that situation, I don't think it's necessarily too surprising. But Frank Vogel, I mean, they were down yesterday to the Orlando Magic at halftime. If they'd lost that game, there's no doubt he was a goner, that's for sure. But I do think that they're on this road trip at the moment, and that by the time they get back to LA, that I don't think Frank Vogel will be the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers anymore. And I think that's basically to do with the fact that no one else can really be gotten rid of at this franchise at the end of the day. The people that are to blame for the Lakers' struggle so far this season, Frank Vogel is the easiest one that you can just oust from his position. Because if we're trying to attribute the blame towards different places, I don't think it's Frank Vogel's fault. I think you bring in a guy like Russell Westbrook, you have to change your system completely, because he's such a ball-dominant player. And especially when you've got a guy like LeBron next to him who you want to be a ball-dominant player as well, you have to completely change your system. And we're talking about Frank Vogel as a defensive-minded coach here, who's led the Lakers to basically having the best defense across the last 2 seasons, and their defense is what won them the championship in the bubble 2 seasons ago. And when you've got guys like Russell Westbrook and Carmelo Anthony coming in, and you have to play them big minutes because you don't really have anyone else, then you just can't have a good defensive team. Like, you can't have a top defensive team. I don't care what coach you are not making up for the defensive lapses that those two guys have, which, to be totally honest, is terrifying sometimes. The amount of defensive lapses where they're just meandering on defense, they're just holes on defense where they completely miss an assignment, they go wandering somewhere and leave a guy wide open. It is actually terrifying, and it is not Frank Vogel's fault. But in saying that, it's also not Russell Westbrook's fault, because this is Russell Westbrook. I've been telling people since the trade happened, this is Russell Westbrook. He's a turnover machine, although his turnovers haven't been too bad the last few games. His shooting is horrendous, and it has been for a while. It's woeful. I mean, Russ is really just downplaying the idea of a triple-double. He is, because it doesn't have too much effect when it comes to him. But as I said, it's not his fault, because this is who Russell Westbrook is. He's never been able to play defense. His shooting has gone downwards, spiraling downwards, really, over the last few years. And he does turn the ball over. Like, that's who he is. So I don't think it's really his fault. This is who we should have expected him to be. We shouldn't have just magically expected that because he's playing with LeBron James that he'll change the way he plays, because he's just never been able to do that. And he's never been able to win with superstars next to him. The best time he's played is when he's with role players, and he can be the complete focal point of an offense. He can have the highest usage rate in the league, practically. It just doesn't work with guys like Russ, and then obviously AD when he's fit. Sorry, guys like LeBron, and then AD when he's there and fit as well. And it just doesn't make any sense. I've heard things like, oh, he should come off the bench as a six-man. Yeah, I understand that, but then I saw a lineup that you should start when AD's not there, with Russ as a six-man. It's like Malik Monk, Avery Bradley, THT, Stanley Johnson, and LeBron. And it's like, wow. Like, this team is just not very good. And again, that comes back to Frank Vogel. Like, why are we expecting them to be any better than a 500 record where they sit currently? They're just a bang average team with a highly overpaid player in Westbrook, not too much young talent, so they can't really do anything trade-wise. They're not going to pick up, like, any buyout candidates aren't going to want to go there at the deadline this season, because they just don't look like a championship winning team. They don't. Now, in saying that, I don't necessarily want to play them in a playoff series, because we know the brilliance of LeBron. We know what AD can do. And Russ might win you a game randomly in the playoffs. He might. But I spoke about it before the season started, that if I was to go into a game tomorrow and I'm LeBron James, would I rather Russell Westbrook or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? And I literally said I'd rather KCP. And the only reason is because I know KCP will sit in a corner, stand out of the way. I might pass the ball occasionally to him. He might hit an open shot occasionally, and he'll try it on defense and play reasonable defense. Russell Westbrook, we know he's a much more talented player. He might have the chance of winning us the game in that situation. But he's also an equally, if not greater, chance of losing us the game with woeful shooting, poor turnovers, and no defense. I'd just rather KCP. Really, I would. And then you're talking about the difference in salary as well. Like, it is incredible. But Frank Vogel, he's the only scapegoat because you can't trade Russ. Russ is on $44 million. No one wants him. You can't trade him. The GM, who I think that the whole blame should go on LeBron. The GM, he's the one that wanted Russell Westbrook. They could have had Buddy Hield. They could have had DeMar DeRozan. They could have had Kyle Lowry at the trade deadline last season, but didn't want to give up Taylor Horton-Tucker. Horrible decision. It is all down to LeBron James because he thought, yeah, I want Russ, and we can make it work. Oh, you can't. You flat out can't. And he's still, it's like he wanted the challenge. He wanted the challenge of, let's see if I can take a team with Russell Westbrook to a championship. Because if he does, if this magically gets turned around and they win a championship, it might be the best thing that LeBron's ever done in his career. Like, totally honestly. It might be the best thing he's ever done in his career. It is the biggest challenge of his career, and therefore, if he overcomes it and completes a championship, it could be the best thing he's ever done. So, the Lakers, there's just no one else. Like, it's not Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka's fault that Russell Westbrook's there. It's like, who's going to say no to LeBron James? When LeBron says, I want this bloke on my team, make it happen, it gets done. It gets done, regardless of what your personal feelings are about it. I'm sure Rob Pelinka would have looked at Russell Westbrook and thought, no, this bloke's not a fit, I don't want him. But because LeBron wanted him, you're not going to say any different, are you? Let's be totally honest. So, those two, obviously Jeannie Buss is the owner, so she's the one that's doing the firing, but Rob Pelinka's not going to go. The GM can't go. AD's kind of sitting to the side. He hasn't helped the situation whatsoever, but he's not really a part of it right now. You can't get rid of Russ because he's on $45 million. So the only bloke you can actually get rid of that might make a semi-bit of difference is Frank Vogel. I don't think it'll make a difference, but he's the major figurehead there that can be ousted. Everyone else has to stay. Everyone has to... What, are you going to get rid of LeBron because he made a bad decision by getting Russ? No. LeBron's still a top 5 player in the world. You're not going to get rid of him. You can't get rid of Russ. You're not going to get rid of Rob Pelinka because it's not his fault. Let's be totally honest right now.